Welcome to the Literate Ghost. My hobby is collecting classic ghost stories. If you're watching this video, there's a pretty good chance that you're also a fan of classic ghost stories. And if you're anything else like me, you may find that the most difficult part of reading these stories is actually finding the time to sit down and read them. So I've put together a series of videos to introduce, or perhaps reintroduce, some awesome classic ghost stories that even the most time-constrained reader should be able to squeeze into a tight schedule. I call this series Small Doses. Our first story is based upon an ancient party game, Blind Man's Buff. The game and the story often go by the modernized title Blind Man's Bluff, mostly due to the fact that the word buff has gone out of fashion. Buff in this case means a light or gentle strike, hit, or tap, as in buffet. I've chosen the older original title since it's more appropriate to the story. Mr. Court, a man that prides himself on his rational thinking and level-headedness, arrives to investigate a potential property, Thorn Manor. Having been delayed on the road, he most unfortunately enters the manor just as the sun is setting, and within moments he finds himself plunged into complete and absolute darkness. Not only can he not find the lights, but despite having just walked in, he cannot find the door. In fact, after wandering about in the darkness, the only thing he manages to find is a single chair, over and over again. As if this was not bad enough, he begins to suspect that he's not alone in Thorn Manor. He begins to hear voices whispering to one another in the darkness, and something keeps touching him, something wet and icy cold. Next up, we have probably the shortest story in this entire series, An Arrest by Ambrose Bierce, coming in at around 7 paragraphs in length. If you're in a hurry, this is the story for you. An Arrest tells the story of Orrin Brower, an escaped murderer that knocks down his jailer and escapes into a nearby forest, where he immediately gets hopelessly lost. He is returned to justice in a very unexpected manner. Hector Hugh Monroe, writing under the pseudonym Saki, was one of the undisputed masters of the short story. Although the majority of his works were darkly comical, he would often throw in a few supernatural elements as well. The Wolves of Cernogratz tells the story of Amelie, a dowdy old governess that seems to know much more about the Cernogratz family legends than her employers had imagined. When she tells them that she is the last of the Cernogratz line, and that the castle that they now inhabit once belonged to her own family, they are extremely dismissive of the old woman. However, when Amelie becomes ill and they begin to hear the sound of gathering wolves, they are far less inclined to doubt her tale. Although most of M.R. James' ghost stories are fairly short, this is one of his shortest, Rats. Despite the title, there are no rats in this story. The rats in the title instead come from a quote from Charles Dickens' short story Tom Tiddler's Ground, where a character discusses a filthy man's bedclothes as heavin' and a heavin' with the rats under 'em. But, asks our narrator, was it rats? For in another case he admits that it was not. There are other things that heave and shiver under the covers of what should be an empty bed, in what should be an empty room. Things that are worse than mere rats. Much worse. Bernard Capes was a prolific author and novelist of many genres, including romance, mystery, and historical works. Although mostly known today for his ghost stories, according to some accounts, including good old Wikipedia, his ghost stories were almost entirely forgotten until they were rediscovered by anthologist Hugh Lamb in the 1970s. A big thanks to the late Mr. Lamb for saving these wonderful stories from obscurity. including this short little tale, The Marble Hands. Two friends on a biking tour of the countryside stop by an old churchyard. One of the men grew up in the area and is strangely wary of the cemetery. He asks his companion to examine one of the graves for him, as he fears to do so himself. It is a strange grave with no headstone, only a pair of marble hands sticking up from a bed of gravel. Viewing them leaves the man with a strange, uneasy feeling. Only when they have ridden miles from the grave does his friend willingly relate the story of the uncanny sculpture and the woman that is buried beneath. All of the stories featured in this video are available online on the Literate Ghost website at theliterateghost.com. Thanks for watching.
Subscribe.